and welcome. There's a lot of buzz in the air and I'm right in the middle of what is called the corridors of power between the North Block and the South Block where the Prime Minister's office is. And right behind me is Rashtrapati Bhavan. Why am I actually talking about all these locations? That's because the buzz is all about a cabinet reshuffle. This week on One Take, I'm asking this question is that whether the Modi government requires a reshuffle or not. Why is it that governments go in for shuffling their packs of ministers? Now, if you go back to a precedence of the Prime Minister, last time round in his last term, he had gone in for 3 reshuffles. Till now, midway and closer to the next Lok Sabha elections of 2024, he's had just 1 cabinet reshuffle. There's a possibility and a likelihood, and many say the need for another cabinet reshuffle. Well, if you look at Dr. Manmohan Singh's term, there were several reshuffles taking place because, he had to placate the several allies. That was a government which was heavily dependent on opposition political parties who were a part of the UPA alliance. To deal with their whims and fancies, with their tantrums, Dr. Manmohan Singh often had to shuffle the pack. But beyond that, as scam after scam started hurting the UPA government, ministers were dropped, new faces had to be brought in, and a party was desperate to have a complete makeover as to face the next Lok Sabha elections. Did not completely work, as the results showed, but that's the question which we are also going to be asking this week is, 1, is there a need for a reshuffle? 2nd, do reshuffles really help the agenda of the government and of the party in power? Well, whether there is a need for reshuffle, well, the jury is still out on that. But most of the reactions that I've started getting on my timeline goes on to show that yes, a reshuffle is required. Now, why is it that a Prime Minister would want to shuffle his pack? First of all, the eye is on the next big elections, which is of course the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. When a party is heading towards Lok Sabha elections, it wants to put its best foot forward. The government certainly wants to put its best foot forward. It has to give a report card of work which has been done, how many of those promises have been delivered, which has been made in the manifesto, which the Prime Minister personally have made those promises. Has his team been able to do that? Has the team been lackluster or lagging behind? It's a mixed kind of reactions when it comes to the present cabinet of the Prime Minister. First of all, the question which many are asking me is that why would he even need to shuffle his pack? Because the face of the government is clearly the Prime Minister. All work is done on his name and therefore it doesn't really matter who his team is. It's not entirely correct to say so, because the captain of the ship can only be stronger if the entire team is equally or close to him in terms of strength and delivering the promises. What's the point of having a good blueprint if you're not able to implement it and you don't have a good team? There are several promises which have been made by the Prime Minister in different sectors, whether it's the financial sectors, the social sectors. The face of those sectors becomes the minister's concern. The interface between the public and the ministers becomes very critical in judging the look of the government, especially one which is heading for Lok Sabha elections. And that is why I personally think that he perhaps needs to shuffle his pack. I'm not going to speculate on any names because that would be really dangerous. With this government, at least you never know what is in the mind of the Prime Minister, who his team is going to be. But clearly the top 5 or the top team have never ever been touched in the reshuffles, which means that there's a continuity as far as the Defence Ministry, the Finance Ministry goes, and these are those important key sectors in which, or even the Foreign Ministry goes. Jai Shankar is someone we especially make a mention of because under him and because he's been a former diplomat and he's worked with the best, clearly he's given that cutting edge for India's foreign policy narrative. The way he stood up to the European countries when it came to taking oil from Russia on the Russia-Ukraine issue, India didn't come across as bending towards pressure coming in from the developed countries, whether it's gone to taking on China, Pakistan and even America where the cases have been. Jai Shankar has stood on toughly and therefore he's seen as an asset to the Prime Minister, whose image certainly is one of a global leader. At least that's the image the BJP would want to portray in 2024, that when it comes to COVID times, when it comes to our financial policies, we have stood up to the Western or developed world, especially our Atmanirbhar policy. In that sense, S. Jaishankar has certainly been one of the aces in the team of the Prime Minister, and it would be no surprise if he continues to remain the External Affairs Minister till the next Lok Sabha elections of 2024. Again, another continuity which we have seen is in the shape of the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. She is delivered on the policies of the government, focus on middle class, focus on women, and also let's not forget she is one of the most powerful women leaders within this government as well. So that's an important factor which will be kept in mind, because after all, one of the main slogans on which the 2024 elections are being fought by the BJP is on women empowerment, on women power. That's another point. Rajnath Singh, continuity. Some, of course, are speculating that perhaps he's going to be eased out, because another important reason or a factor which is kept in mind for a government heading for elections is that of strengthening the organization. You need people who can strengthen the organization. Look, BJP is not going to be smug or complacent. They are not going to think, oh, we are going to come back to power because the opposition is weak or the opposition is not yet united. Much as in Gujarat, where it seemed, at least when we went around to the various areas, that it's going to be a cakewalk for the BJP, but the BJP workers or the leaders did not seem to be giving out that impression. They were out there, they were fighting every battle, because what was the challenge for them was to improve their tally from last time round. That's exactly the mantra of the Prime Minister and the BJP for 2024. That this time round, we are going to come back with a huge number, even beat the record of 400 plus of the Rajiv Gandhi government. But more than that, reduce our reliance on our allies. As it is, this government doesn't have too many allies because they prefer to do it on their own. But this time round, I think the strategy of the BJP would be to ensure that when they come back, and if they come back to power in 2024, it is with little reliance on the allies, it's on their own, and also more importantly, they increase the tally. And for that, they need to have very good, strong organization people, particularly in those states where, one, they could face an anti-incumbency, and second, in those states, the BJP doesn't have much of a footing. Which is why you will find that the BJP is giving a lot of attention to, say, West Bengal. There's this whole calculation that perhaps the BJP may not be able to match its numbers from that state as it got in the last Lok Sabha elections. It doesn't want to take any chance. It's looking at newer states, Odisha for example. It's looking at down south, at Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and of course even at Kerala. And therefore, it would require people who understand the language. It would require leaders who are very, very strong with the organization. Therefore, the possibility of some of the ministers being dropped and sent in charge of organization to give a strong look to the organization can also not be completely ruled out. Which is why I go back to my earlier question on whether reshuffle is really required. I think it is required because it needs to give that cutting edge to the organization and also to the government as well. There is, without taking names, certain ministers who are considered not up to the mark. They are likely to be replaced. More importantly, there are certain ministries which are very, very critical with an eye on the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Finance Ministry, of course, the Social Sector Ministry, of course. We also see the Ministry of Law. These are going to be important ministries where the Prime Minister would certainly want strong, perhaps possibly younger faces with a strong messaging going across. Going back to the second question, whether reshuffles work, yes and no. Like in the case of Dr. Manmohan Singh, who had at least 3 reshuffles in his last term before they lost the elections to the BJP, it was very, very clear that the party was so down and out. The government was so pulled down by many controversies. Just shuffling the pack of many of those faces who were discredited was not going to help save his government or his party to remain in power. To that extent, the BJP understands that it is important to have a reshuffle, but not too frequent, not to pander to anyone's tantrums, but to send out a strong messaging. The Prime Minister has been very reticent and reluctant, I would say, in carrying on multiple reshuffles. Whenever they've taken place, they have been very significant, they have been meaty, with very strong messaging that went across. For example, you had Kiran Rejig as a law minister, very clearly a message and upswing not just for him personally or politically speaking, but also messaging that you have someone who's younger, who knows what he wants to take on the judiciary as far as the collegium issue is concerned. Similarly, there are poll-bound states. There are states like Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh. Are you going to be seeing that shuffling of pack there, clearly with an eye on those states? Will there be more representations for, say, Rajasthan at the centre? Is there a possibility that Rajavardhan Rathore is brought back to the centre? Well, that's just about anybody's guess, which is why I began by saying I'm not going to hazard any speculation on this. Is there a possibility that the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh may be changed and someone from the centre is sent over there? Do give in your reactions on the social media timeline whether the Modi government does require reshuffle and whether reshuffle really sends out a strong political message. Thank you so much for watching.